It seems inevitable that when two people fundamentally disagree on something such as religion or the nature of existence, there will be some friction in trying to win the other to your side. Yes, many people, perhaps even most, believe what they do unquestioningly, because that's just what they've been taught or because it's otherwise convenient. There are those, atheist and theist, on the other hand, who are more thoughtful. They come to conclusions because, like it or not, that's where they see the evidence lead, and will happily change their mind should the weight of evidence shift.
And both of us, I think, hold that religion should be debated in a rational way as anything else. I share his passion for truth. What divides us is our worldviews, his atheistic, mine theistic, and Christian. Neither of us wishes to base his life on a delusion. But which is the delusion? Atheism or Christianity? That is for each of us to decide on the basis of the evidence, of course.
If an atheist intends to win the Christian to his side, what are some things that he should do?
Violent, irrational, intolerant, allied to racism and tribalism and bigotry, invested in ignorance and hostile to free inquiry, contemptuous of women and coercive toward children. Organized religion ought to have a great deal on its conscience.
No doubt Hitchens would win points with people who already agree, but this would do very little to advance the conversation in a meaningful way with people who don't. The same sort of terrible things, and perhaps even worse, could be said of atheistic regimes. Does this impugn all atheists? I don't think so. It's an emotional appeal that paints with too broad of a brush, as if atheists or religions were some monolith.
I'm sure that you would be rightly insulted, and I wouldn't suggest it for a moment, if I were to say that because you and Stalin were atheists, that you would have approved of the ruthless elimination of millions. You rightly expect me to differentiate between atheists. I would like you to differentiate between religions.
If there is one that is violent or irrational or racist or hostile to free inquiry or any of these awful things, point it out and you'll find reasonable Christians to stand against it shoulder to shoulder with you.
The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction. Jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
I wouldn't want to believe in a God who at all resembled this either. No reasonable person would. But again, why doesn't this sort of technique work on the thoughtful Christian who's genuinely interested in exploring the atheistic argument? It isn't because they're okay with a petty, malevolent God or that they're bigoted or for violence, but because it bears no resemblance to what they actually believe. It's a caricature devoid of context. For instance, if I describe a movie, single father tries to get his son to take over the family business, would you recognize that as Star Wars? Or would you recognize boy spends 7 years being a third wheel as an accurate description of the Harry Potter series? Or would you recognize homicidal girl ruins her sister's chance to be on TV as a fair description of Hunger Games? These descriptions might be technically true in a weird way, but removing a work from its context twists it into something that's unfair and unrecognizable. Any idea or any belief could be boiled down and stripped of context to make it look like something that it isn't. The question is whether those characterizations are fair in context. The picture we painted of the movies with the misleading descriptions, they're easily dissipated by just a cursory understanding of the context, just as are these kinds of objections. If the skeptic instead engages with Christianity's difficulties fairly and in context, they will get much further. It's easy to mock ignorant and shallow retorts from Christians. Yes, they do exist, and there's lots of them. But it's another thing entirely to instead engage with the strongest answers that have been put forth by scholars who deal seriously with these objections. Just like the religious person who underplays the arguments of the atheistic position, there's a real danger, If people find out the other side has responses that you misrepresent or don't take into account, they may mistrust you and question why you didn't address those issues head on. You may undermine your case against Christianity by exaggerating like this. If it really is that obviously bad, you don't need to exaggerate your claims against it. Tell it straight, in context, and let honest truth seekers weigh it for themselves. There are volumes of studied responses to these objections, and they've been around for longer than most of us have been alive. It's easy to make a straw man, but it takes a lot more time and thoughtfulness to look at opposing views in their best light. The risk is, however, that in discussing these issues more fairly, looking to understand not only the weaknesses but also the strengths of the other side, you run the risk of changing your own mind. If you're willing to take on that risk, then you'll either find a more receptive audience or you'll find the truth for yourself. One of my favorite atheists, Drew McCoy from Genetically Modified Skeptic, he and I come to different conclusions, but our goal is the same. As you listen, you can swap atheist for Christian, and I think you've got a formula that works both ways.
The arguments which theists so often use just don't appear to work in convincing many atheists to convert. If you really want to convert an atheist, you're probably better off being genuinely open, loving, and ready to listen rather than argue. And you know, I, and I'm sure many other atheists, welcome that approach even if it is more effective. So I think it's best that theists get informed on how atheists actually think so we can breed peace and understanding in these conversations rather than strife. Regardless of which side of the God question you fall on, if you assume what your interlocutor thinks rather than ask them, that's not only ignorant but incredibly arrogant. If you use arguments which your interlocutor has refuted 1,000 times before, that's not only ignorant but a waste of everyone's time. If you want to convince someone of anything, listen to them before you speak, understand them before you object, and care for them before you chastise them. The fact that all too many theists fail to do those things is precisely why so many fail to convert atheists.
Thanks, Drew. I couldn't have said it better myself. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more in the future, go ahead and subscribe. Whether you agree or disagree, I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments down below.